that list of priorities you mentioned aligns with the major design concepts that your office has been putting out. The first one came out in January, and as you mentioned, was focused on optimizing the information environment for cloud. Can you tell us what that means and what you're doing specifically to get after this objective?
Sure. So the first thing I have to do is define the information environment. When we talk about the information environment, we're talking about it in the context that DoD talks about it. So that the short answer is the information environment is actually everything. It is our infrastructure in garrison, but it's also our infrastructure when we're deployed. It's our infrastructure aboard ships, at expeditionary advanced bases. It is computers and networks, it's operational technology, it's national security systems. The information environment is everything. The next thing that I think I probably have to do is define cloud, because unfortunately, the term cloud has been misunderstood. It's a broadly misunderstood term, even though it's been well defined and it's old. So the definition we're hewing to is the one that NIST provided in 2012. And it describes 5 fundamental aspects of cloud, right? 5 fundamental attributes that define what cloud means, right? Things like being able to determine how much of a service you're consuming at any given time, or being able to rapidly provision it yourself. That is cloud, right? So when we talk about cloud, sometimes we use modifiers. Public cloud being the cloud we buy from others, right? Private cloud being the cloud we provide ourselves, hybrid cloud being the mix of the two, right? And multi-cloud being any capability that demands multiple different public and private service cloud offerings. And then, with those understandings in mind, as far as how do we actually optimize for cloud, we've broken that out into several objectives. The first thing that we talk about, and it's not a long document. If you haven't, gone and read it, anyone in your audience, I would strongly recommend just pull it up on Google. It's called Optimize the Information Environment for Cloud. It's a major design concept published by Don-CIO. And it talks about, sort of 3 broad objectives within that. The one of them that I would stress here is diversifying transport. So our relationship with cloud has been somewhat weird as a Department of Defense. We think of the network as the thing that we're trying to protect. And we think of the boundaries of the network as where our defenses live. And that's not a modality of thinking that can carry on indefinitely into the future. As we move toward adopting zero trust, implementing zero trust across the enterprise, what that's going to drive us to is more data-centric thinking, right? Zero trust is a data-centric security model. So that means, by extension, that our bespoke DoD infrastructure, our bespoke DoDIN, doesn't need to be the network that we're using to access cloud services, right? We should be able to use networks of convenience. We should be able to use public networks, untrusted networks, to go and find and grab the services that we need, actually implement those services, provision them ourselves rapidly, and deprovision them when they're no longer needed. What we've done before is we've sort of built castles. And I think what we're trying to do now is more hide in the noise, right? The further we go forward, the more we're going to look like everything else you might see, right? Any other traffic that exists in that environment. And it won't be, possible for adversaries and competitors to distinguish our presence from anything else. That's kind of where we're headed. So that's a lot of answer. I want to make sure I'm getting at your question.
Yeah, no, I think you are. I'm curious about the piece you mentioned about using networks of convenience. How far off is the Navy from that reality? And maybe you touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the obstacles in the way of that?
Sure. I don't think it's far off. We have done some experiments that show that it's imminently possible to take networks that we don't own and use them to access services that we do control. So the Navy's flank speed environment is an Azure tenant inside Azure sort of mil-cloud environment. And that's where our data on NIPRNet broadly lives. It's also how we defend NIPRNet. The tools that we use to defend the Navy's extension of the DoDN live in that environment and work very well. We also access those services from untrusted networks today. More often than not, I am actually accessing flank speed from a personally owned device in my home, not using a VPN, not connecting to the DoDN, but connecting to the services that I need. So that is in production, in operations for 500,000 people today. The part that is probably further off is the closer we get to the tactical edge, the more challenging it is to make broad scale changes to systems and networks, right? Their designs tend to be more static and somewhat more brittle. And so, we have to apply a thoughtful approach to how we begin to use networks of convenience to do increasingly difficult and increasingly important things the closer we get to the forward edge.